Welcome to Talking Voiceovers with me, Gail Goslin, where we interview professionals of the South African voiceover industry to inspire each other and newcomers. Today we'll be talking to Tanya Franzsen, voice artist, content writer, actor, pianist, horse rider, lady of many hats. So stay tuned while we discuss setting up your home studio, voiceover training, character voices, and a whole lot more. Hello!
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Well, thanks.
Awesome to meet you.
You too.
Thank you for agreeing to be on Talking Voiceovers.
It's such a pleasure. I was so surprised when I got your email. So thank you for wanting to chat to me.
Well, you're a voiceover artist and I want to hear from everyone. So
amazing.
So Tanya, tell us where you grew up and how you came to be who you are today.
Okay. How long do you have? I grew up on a farm outside Pretoria, close to a town called Babsfontein. My mother was a part-time horse breeder, so I grew up amongst animals. And then after school, I went and I studied journalism for a bit, and then I moved to Australia to become a dancer and to study dance, and got a back injury, and then shifted my major to choreography and music composition. Came back here after 3 years in Sydney, and then I did a degree in creative writing at the Northwest University. So I've been everywhere, essentially. And then I landed back in Pretoria, probably 2014. Yes, I've been in the creative industry since then, working in various capacities. While I was at university, I did vocal arranging for show choir groups and did choreography and a bit of theatre work. Yes, and I started looking at doing backing vocals for people. And I did an internship with a lady called Marley Kelly, who did a lot of Idol South Africa things. And through her, I met a lady who introduced me to voiceover work. And I didn't, you hear people on the radio, but you don't know that it's actually a career choice, because growing up where I did, that wasn't really an option. She introduced me to the world of voiceovers, and I slowly started making my way in and doing odd little jobs and got a lot of, track time behind the mic. And it taught me a lot.
So you did formal training then for voiceovers?
My first formal official voiceover training I did with South African Voiceover Academy about 2 weeks ago. That was my first official training I did. I did a lot of research on my own and checked out various YouTube channels. Obviously, channels like yours make such a big difference in the world of voiceover, because you learn about various aspects. But I learned so much from SAVOA, and people think, oh, you've been in the industry for 7 years, you must do what could you possibly learn? You can learn a lot. Never think you know everything. It is very interesting. So that was my first official training, but a lot of my training was done just in studio. One of the first professional jobs I got was doing telephone on hold things, and it was a lot of scripts, and then you learn to read. You learn to read punctuation well and things like that. I also, at university, a lecturer of mine in the creative field asked for someone to do voiceover work for an exhibition she was part of, and that was actually my first non-professional but voice-orientated job, and I learned to appreciate this art form a lot more then.
And then the subsequent voice work that you've been getting since your first one, have you been getting it through agents or networking or by yourself, marketing?
I officially joined Voice Bank in 2015, I think, or the end of 2014. And the majority of my work I got through Voice Bank, and then through people you meet at Voice Bank, producers and sound people you meet. I sort of unintentionally networked, because I don't think I'm very good at networking. It's something you've made me alert to, so I'm trying to work on that. Yes, your reputation is in this industry is something to hold on to. So through work I gained more work. But yes, I do have an agent, but she's my acting agent. She has a voice bank as well. Most of my work is referral work, and I recently joined Voice Me as well, so been getting some stuff through there.
If you're enjoying this episode, give us a thumbs up. Do you find that your acting work helps you in your voice work as well?
Yes, I never actually realized it. I had a very compartmentalized view on it, and I sort of went, okay, well, this is voice. And then when you do voice, you go into the studio and you approach it like I approach singing. I don't attach necessarily a character to singing work. So then recently someone said to me, but just connect with the character and whatever you're trying to sell will come alive in a very different way. So I started practicing that way. And I honestly, it's changed my voiceover approach so much because it feels more authentic. I think it was Craig Ross that mentioned something. I mean, he didn't mention it in such a specific way, but he did to like sort of connecting characters in a very more acting approach. Because I did one of SAVOA's Wednesday free voiceover classes just to see what it was all about. And him talking to one of the other participants in the Zoom call, he sort of mentioned, getting into that mode and connecting with that character and how it changes the color of your voice and all these different sort of very technical things. And I'm a bit of a technical geek when it comes to sort of that things. And obviously Craig knows so much about the psychology of voice work, and it's such a big thing. So I thought, well, I'm going to approach it. And I took like a few practice scripts and just sort of looked at what happened. And it changed a lot of how I from now on approach voice work. I just go, even if there isn't a deliberate character named on the brief, I will invent something if I have to, because I just feel it just lends itself to more authentic performance.
So when you act, you're always in character. You don't ever act as yourself.
No, I don't feel safe doing that.
That's interesting.
No, I find it's much more comfortable when you can be something somebody else created and make that person come to life.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's really a different take on it.
I feel much safer in that space, especially on camera or on stage or things like that. It's much nicer to be able to portray someone else's story or tell their story.
Wow. So have you done any cartoon characters or characters?
I did a few things for an Afrikaans brand for a little mini series they had for junior entrepreneurs. And it was very interesting because I had to do both characters, and it was sort of a more male character and a more female character. And finding the different voices for these characters was very interesting. I think, and this is just a personal opinion, that Afrikaans lends itself to characterization in a different way than English does, because it's such a gruff, sort of pointed language. So it has this really interesting way of coming to life behind a microphone. And I really enjoyed the character, but I haven't done a lot of English stuff. I did a campaign a few years ago for a company, an HIV campaign for them, which was also a character. And I mean, I was probably 32 at the time, and I had to play a 16-year-old girl. So it's different. It's very different doing characters, especially if they're much younger, because my voice tends to lean more towards the more mature end of the spectrum. So having to, go over here seems very, and then I automatically link an accent to it. So it creates this whole little weird world on its own.
How do you juggle theatre acting and voice acting and all the other things that you do?
I don't know if I do juggle it. I think I just sort of land in the middle of it and go, right, what needs attention immediately? And I recently started working as a content writer, and that's very much on a deadline basis. So it forces me to be more disciplined. I try and dedicate sections of the day to whatever projects require the most attention. Obviously, if I've got rehearsals for a theatre show or one of the bands I play for, we've got a show coming up, then that takes priority, and everything else I sort of filter around that. And yes, I'm trying to work on my juggling skills, but it is not always successful. Necessity demands whatever to show up when it does, and that requires attention.
And because you're doing so many different things, you're always busy.
You think so. But yes, obviously the last 2 years aren't a very good measure of how it usually goes. But yes, I tend to be quite busy, and I prefer it that way. I find I'm better when I'm busy with most things. I like going between different jobs and having days that don't look the same. It's my preferred way of life, even if it is really unstable, which it is.
How do you find a work-life balance with all these different things that you do? What's your secret?
Having a really good morning routine.
Oh,
that has been a very, very important grounding factor in my life, to sort of just start the day in a specific disciplined way. And I have a very big schedule and a calendar on my phone with all different colors, and everything is in its color box. And if it's color coordinated on the schedule, it happens. But things do slip through the cracks. I'm very specific with boundaries. So there are certain days where I just go, look, I'm sorry, if you're not going to die, if it's not an absolute emergency, it does not get my attention today, because it's a family day or whatever else is a priority at that time. But I do have to be very specific and deliberate with boundaries.
That's a good idea. Not overwork yourself. Do you do a lot of sport to keep healthy and running? And
I do. I'm unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on how you look at it, married to a very athletic human. And much of what we do together is cycling or trail running or things like that. But I never used to be a sporty person. And then I somehow found a sense of sanity in it. And I therefore now prioritize it. It has become a game changer. And especially, I never knew how important it was until it was removed via lockdowns or whatever restrictions were in place at the time. That sort of made me go, oh gosh, this has become such an integral part of my life. And if I don't do it, things start to go a bit skew. So I do try and prioritize that.
What words of advice would you give your high school going self?
What would I give my high school going self? Don't be so concerned with what other people are doing. Learn to trust your insights. You have innate wisdom within you that will always keep you on the right path for you. And what is the right path for you might not be the right path for anybody on this planet. And that is really scary and really daunting. It doesn't matter. Make like a racehorse, put the little blinkers on and just stay in your lane.
So during lockdown, did you have a home studio that you worked out of?
No, I've only recently, I did have a setup. I was fortunate enough to be very close to a friend of mine who has a home setup, and she's a musician, so I could pop in there and do the work that needed to be done. But I've only recently started setting up my home studio, and it's a very, very interesting process. I'm learning a lot. I live in a very old house with wooden floors, and when you think something is silent, it really is not. Fortunately, in recent times, I had very, very, very noisy neighbors, and they have moved, which helped because they had small kids and a dog. You can't make your career your neighbors' problem necessarily. So it became an interesting juggling act. But soundproofing, all that stuff. I've learned so much about it from people that you've had as guests on your podcast, talking about home studios and soundproofing options and mics. And oh my gosh, there's such an incredible, overwhelming amount of information available on the internet. So having like a trusted source that can go, okay, yes, I hear you. For your budget, this is what is the best. Because if you go in there, you just read review after review after review, and it's not necessarily relevant to our market, or it's not available in our country, or it comes in at a massive price. So it's figuring out ways to do things in a cost-effective way to rig yourself. But it's going well thus far, I think. I've yet to do a job from home, but I'm fortunate enough to know quite a few studio owners in Pretoria. So I've made arrangements with them to go, listen, if I'm in a tight spot, if your studio is available, could I come in? So I've got 2 or 3 studios in Pretoria that I've got arrangements with in case of emergency.
So most of all the work that you've done in voice so far has been in studio then, not at home.
Yes.
That's fantastic.
So I prefer going into studio. I saw now when I was with SAVOA as well, and I was back in the booth, I was so nervous because it's been a while. I don't know, there's something about being in a space with a producer and with a creative team, and I really live for the collaboration aspect and the connection, and try this, and the in the room feel. I also said to my acting agents, like, look, I know we can deliver tapes, but if the casting director is offering that we can go into studio, I will drive to Johannesburg for a 10-minute audition. I do not care. I prefer to be in the room. I prefer it.
So then, do you prefer full body acting or voice acting?
Voice acting for me is still full body acting. I realized I can't detach the two. My voice changes the moment I try and keep still. My voice, the pitch changes, my delivery changes. So I'm one of those people that does a voiceover, but full bodied.
Okay, so then the question I should have asked would have been, do you prefer acting in front of an audience or in a studio?
That's a very good question, Gail. They're both so different for me. Acting on stage is such an interesting, energetic exchange, and the immediacy of it is what I absolutely love about theatre. It is this absolutely isolated moment that exists only in this specific space and with these specific audience members, and it is very fleeting and very transient and beautiful and perfect. In voice acting, I feel you have that same sort of immediacy, but obviously due to the fact that it can be edited and cut and put together, that's a different kind of thrill. What I prefer about voice acting is the way in which you can use your voice in a way that brings this character to life in a completely non-visual way, because you don't have the usual visual cues you can rely on stage, like facial expressions or gestures. So you have to get your facial expression across over a microphone, which is a completely different skill. And it's a massive challenge. I absolutely love it.
I want to go back to your studio. What did you decide on? What microphone have you got, and how do you treat your surrounding space?
I have a Samsung CO1 condenser mic and that I've borrowed from a friend. Actually, it was a spare one that she had lying around. The sound card I have at the moment is giving me a bit of problems, so I'm researching new sound card options. I have a USB mic as well that I usually travel with to do auditions or anything like that. It's a Mackie USB mic and it works quite well. And I recently started, whenever I do training or trying to keep myself up to date with things, I put the mic in the cupboard and put a duvet over me and do my voice work into the cupboard, because I find that is the most consistent sound I can deliver. So I can stand, I can do everything I need to do. It's still in a relatively isolated space without the necessary eggshells and things like that.
And you can still move around and use your body movements.
Yes. My other option is to stay seated, but then chairs squeak or things like that. So I prefer being standing. And yes, I found the cupboard is the most neutral space I can find.
What advice would you give to somebody starting out in voiceover?
Do a course. I would recommend it. People often think that I've got a lot of actor friends who would love to do voiceover just to supplement income or because they actually really, really are passionate about it. Don't think because you're an actor, you are necessarily a good voice actor. They are very, very different skill sets. So I would recommend getting formal training, and voice training for acting is not necessarily the same voice training that you get for voiceover work because the deliveries are different and it's a different approach. I would also, most importantly, to any person on this planet, learn to read, spend hours reading scripts out loud, learning to read punctuation, learning to read copies, learning to read ahead. Reading is one of the most important things in voiceover work for me.
That's funny that it keeps coming up, though. You'd think, everybody's learned to read at school, or almost. I mean, I can understand some people might not have very much so. Does it come up for you in short scripts, or is it mostly in the long scripts that you find reading is important?
All of them, especially punctuation, reading punctuation and being able to read tone. Because, you get to studio, you get your script, you've got, 5, maybe 10 minutes, you go through it, blah, blah, blah. And then you're in studio and you have to deliver. And if you're not comfortable reading, you're going to have trouble. If you might have trouble when a creative director says to you, okay, yeah, but I need you to perhaps deliver this line slightly more happy, or do this with like a blue tinge, or whatever creative words they choose to use. If you're still bogged down in reading, you're going to find yourself tripping over things that could be quite manageable if you're comfortable reading. And even short copies, longer copies, if you can read a short copy comfortably, you'll be fine with a longer copy. I think people who read a lot, just read books or whatever, a lot might find it easier. But reading punctuation out loud it's a skill. Not all copies are created equal. There is that to be said as well. But there is a certain skill set that is involved with reading out loud and going, oh, I'm going to deliver this sentence in this way because after the comma, there's a new thought and then my attack needs to change in this way. So it's a very different skill set.
Would you think that acting classes would come in useful for that kind of thing? How do you learn tone and how do you learn that kind of thing?
I don't know that acting classes would necessarily help because there you're supposed to be off book. You don't very often read a script and as you're reading it, you're going to deliver it the same way because then you put the script down and you perform it. And that, for me as an actor, comes from a different place. There is skill for cold reads and things like that. But in general, the way I approach an acting script is very different to how I approach a voiceover script. For tone, I know Craig Ross is this really interesting thing that teaches you about pitching and placement and la 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 and changing things like that and changing your attack and adding a smile to your voice and things like that. So I think literally the only way in which to improve that skill is to take books or take scripts and practice reading them out loud and record yourself so you can hear what your voice does.
Yes, that's a good idea. Yeah.
We all have, different general natural timbres to our voice, and mine tends to be more dark and I tend to speak a bit more in the back of my mouth. It comes across, even when I'm doing a happy script, it might come across slightly more dark. So I have to work really hard on putting a smile in my voice because otherwise it sounds very gloomy. So those are things you can only really hear once you've spent a lot of time listening to and recording your own voice. And I know that is, for beginner voiceover artists, it's a very scary thing because probably for most people, the first time you hear your voice, you never ever want to speak again, but you get used to it. That's just a general note. You will always get used to it. And then you can go, oh, when I say a word in this tone of voice, it's different. And then when I take this approach, you you learn your own tricks and you see where your shortfalls are, where your shortcomings are, or habits that you picked up. It's very, very essential to record and listen to yourself and practice.
So basically, you have to put a lot of work into honing your craft. You can't just expect to say, I've got a nice voice, I can do voiceovers.
Well, it's like most things in life, you have to know it very well in order to be able to use it to its best advantage, I suppose.
What sort of scripts do you do? Just commercials, or do you do e-learning or anything else?
I've done a few e-learning and quite a few like explainer videos for medical companies, a fair bit of commercial voice work, radio work and television. Yeah, I'd say that's the majority of it. I've done a few long form corporates, which I prefer. I love them. I love the story narratives and things, but they're few and far between for me for some reason. It's just, I don't know, there's a narrative storytelling aspect, and it's colorful. I can see it in front of my face usually. So it's I really enjoy those. I did an amazing thing for SA Fashion Week a few years ago. That's to this day been one of my favorite voiceovers, or one of my favorite jobs, where I had to put descriptions for, it was a collaboration between a jeweler and a fashion house. And I had to essentially narrate the descriptions for these collaborative pieces. And it was just beautiful language and creative. And it was just, it was one of my favorite jobs to date.
As a content writer, do you also write voiceover scripts?
No, I haven't. But I wouldn't mind. I would like to do that. But I usually write reviews for people. I write a lot of tech blogs and things like that. I've considered doing voiceover, but I have no idea where to start because I don't work for an advertising agency. So it could be a bit tricky.
Do you work for yourself then, freelance?
Yes, I freelance. I work for an international company that often sends me jobs for briefs for whatever they're busy with.
I think it's good to know for people starting out that you can get really bad copy, and you have to try and make it sound like it means something, even if the words make absolutely no sense.
Yeah, it's necessary. It's a skill, and it comes in line with professionalism and all that. You're here to do a job, and whether you believe in what they're saying or you like the product or whatever is completely irrelevant. You have to step into a space where you go, you know what? Yes, I 100% believe this. No idea what I'm saying, but I am going to commit to delivering this authentically. Do whatever it takes in your mind to get to the place where you can do that.
Do you ever get scripts like that you really don't like what you're saying, but you have to say it like it's amazing?
Fortunately not in the voiceover work. I've had to play characters where me as a person, I don't agree with the choices they're making. But in voiceover work, I've never been in a situation like that.
Do you have anything else to add that you'd like everybody to know about?
Listen to Gail's podcasts.
Oh,
but seriously, join the Mzansi voiceover people group on Facebook. Has been really, really amazing. There's so much good content on there, and connect with people. Like, I'm still learning to do the connecting networking thing. It's not my favorite thing in the world, but it is a worthy skill. And if you can learn to separate it from yourself, as in it's not personal. Yes, you are the product as such, but it's not personal. You can develop the necessary skills to take yourself further. And it's a very tight-knit group of people in South Africa in the voiceover world. So handle yourself professionally. Don't sell yourself as something you're not. Know what you're good at. Always work at the skills that you're not so good at, but don't put yourself forward for things that you know you're going to spend 3 hours in studio trying to nail a 30-second ad. If you know it's not your thing, don't do it. If you don't speak a language really well, don't say that you speak that language. And I know that sometimes is an issue. Our country has so many beautiful languages and people who speak them beautifully. So
you do work in Afrikaans a lot?
Yes, I do get Afrikaans work.
50-50 with English?
No, way more English work. It's about probably 70-30 at the moment. But I enjoy the Afrikaans work. It's difficult. My Afrikaans reading, because I don't read Afrikaans a lot, my Afrikaans reading sucks.
Aha.
So I have to work a lot on Afrikaans reading. I had to do a long form corporate thing in Afrikaans, and it was a struggle. At that point, I went, oh gosh, I need to practice the Afrikaans. So it's just practice out loud. And don't think because you read it a certain tempo in your head that you're going to be able to deliver it at that tempo.
Because you read it at a certain tempo in your head, you won't be able to deliver it at that tempo. What would make the difference?
If it's a very wordy script, it might take literally longer for your mouth to form the words. You'll read something and you'll go, oh yeah, because your brain goes, yeah, I know what I'm reading. So there's this immediacy between input and your brain registering what you're saying in your mind. But the moment that has to go to the next space of you speaking it, it literally just might take a few seconds longer because words take longer to form.
So when you practice, then you shouldn't just be practicing in your head.
No,
reading.
practice out loud. Practice out loud. Everything out loud. That's a skill I learned from when I started dancing when I was very young. Practice it how you're going to perform it. Don't, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I know what I'm doing. And then, if you're going to be delivering it this way, then practice it this way. And how you practice is how you're going to perform. So especially if you're nervous, you always default to your last familiar one. And if that was a wishy-washy attempt at it, then you will deliver a wishy-washy attempt. So practice it full steam.
That's a very good point. Very interesting. Thank you.
And your neighbors are going to think you're insane, but that's just part of the fun.
Well, maybe one day you'll be famous and they'll go, oh, I remember her. She used to practice in the bedroom.
Yes, that's probably, we're all hoping for that.
How can people reach you if they'd like to ask you questions or just find out more about you?
They can reach me on Instagram. I am at Tanya with a J .Franzsen. I am on LinkedIn as under Tanya Franzsen as well. And I am on Facebook, but not a lot at the moment. Facebook, I'm avoiding Facebook. I'm in the process of creating a website. So once that's out, that will be on all my social media platforms as well. I'm also available if you want to listen to my voice clips on voiceme.coza. And all my voice stuff is on there.
Amazing. Well, thanks for joining us.
It was awesome.
We'll see you around.
Yes, definitely. Thanks for everything you do.
Thank you.
See you around. Thanks, Gail.
Cheers, Tanya. Thanks for watching Talking Voiceovers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you're not subscribed yet, go ahead and click that button and hit the bell so you don't miss any of the following episodes.